Have you ever found yourself asking, is real change actually possible? Maybe it's an ex you're thinking about taking back, or you've taken back and you're wondering, can they really change? Or maybe you had some eating habits that need some work and you've kind of been on a diet roller coaster for a long time. That was me. Or maybe you've just found yourself saying, oh, by like this age, I thought I would be grown out of this, or I thought I would be here. Well, as a person that has gone through big, lasting transformations and changes, I want to help you shortcut and bring you some tips for some things that you can kind of get implemented right away and start making the changes that you really desire. A few years ago, I was riding around in a car with some of my friends who've done some really cool things with their life. And I was just coming out of a phase of having been extremely uncomfortable in my body, having now lost almost 100 pounds from that point, and kind of just coming off letting alcohol go from my life and working on some like interpersonal relationships and really kind of how I was talking to myself. And it was not nice up here. I was not nice to myself. But because of that, because of those patterns and behaviors, I was just wondering if real change was really possible. Was I ever going to be able to achieve the things that people in my life achieved or that I cared about achieved? It's no wonder I was there, because I came of age in the 1990s where the American dream was still alive and well, where we were telling young girls they could be anything they wanted to be. So when I found myself in a place that I didn't want to be and I did want to make some changes, I'm like, how do people actually do this? So, what I have found works the best and what worked for me. And let me just say, you may have heard some of these things before, and that's all right. I'm just a messenger. Maybe my message will hit home with you, maybe it won't. If it doesn't, you can find someone else who does. But small incremental changes really do build lasting change. Figuring out like your core underlying beliefs and motivations, finding inspiring people to be around, questioning whether beliefs are actually yours or if they're things you picked up along the way, staying consistent with them, giving yourself grace. All of those things lead to real lasting change. And that's what we're going to dive into. One of the tools that's helped me along my way of learning how to change and go through personal growth and change mindset is really understanding how our brain and how our body chemistry works. That took a lot of the blame and shame and guilt away for maybe why I was in kind of these repeated patterns. So ultimately, all your system is trying to do at all times is keep you safe. And one of the ways that it does that is through kind of chugging back to your default behaviors, neural pathways. You may have heard of those. And a lot of those form from a really young age. They are from things that happened to us even as early as in the womb, before we could talk, before we could walk, from culture, from our parents, from society at large, where you grew up. All of those things can really affect who you are. So I think the first thing is just to say, like, you have done the best that you can do thus far with the skills that you have been given. So, really kind of understanding how the brain and the body works. If you find yourself kind of beating yourself up about something, do a little Googling, do a little bit of research, and learn some more about the nervous system and the brain and the body. Okay, so we've established that maybe your makeup right now isn't everything that you picked. Your decisions, the things that you bought, the houses that you chose to live in, the relationships you chose to have, the jobs you chose to take, a lot of that is from programming from a really young age. But understanding that, now you can take ownership of what you want to do next. So I think that's another really big thing, is not feeling like the victim, not feeling stuck, always feeling like you have options, because you do. I know this comes up a lot of times, like with parents who have maybe rigid schedules, or maybe you're a caretaker for your parents, and people are like, this is my circumstance, this is my situation, this is just the way it is, there's no way for me to get around it. Well, Maybe that's true. You got little kids, you got to pick them up from school, your time, your schedules, those things are kind of determined by your family. But you can always work on your attitude around those things. You can always find ways to kind of weave in more joy or more pleasure to those situations, like listening to good music or podcasts or growing yourself outside of those rigid parts of your life so that when things do change, because they inevitably do, that's kind of the cycle of life, that you're more equipped when you have an opportunity to bring more of the things that you want into your life. So, taking ownership is a really big step for how you're going to move forward in the future. That's essentially what changes is working toward a new future you. All right, this is where tough love Lanny comes in. You're wrong. Yep, I said it. You're wrong. Whatever you're doing is wrong. And I say that because you've only been doing what you've been doing because of the resources that you currently have. So just be open to saying, like, maybe I'm not right about this. Maybe I could think differently about this. Maybe there's another perspective on this. And just be really open to being really freaking wrong about a lot of things. It's easier to stay with our current beliefs that we have than to maybe adopt new ones. It's going to be uncomfortable, but that's really where change happens, is on the cusp of like where you're currently at and kind of where that uncomfortable buffer zone is. So I just want you to get comfortable being wrong. So if we're willing to accept that our current behaviors are dictated by our subconscious beliefs from our childhood, from culture, and from society, then we can do something about it. You've got to decide kind of when you're going through your day to day and you find yourself compelled to do something, or there's a repeated habit that you have, or your calendar, the things that you're putting on it, and ask yourself, like, is this mine or is it someone else's? Is this really a thing that I want? If you find yourself coulding, shoulding, woulding, have to, those are all kind of indicators that those things might not be yours. They might be things that you have picked up from the space that you live in or the culture that you live in. So, really kind of deciding like what is yours and what isn't. Okay, so you've identified some things that you either really like or you really don't like in your life, and maybe there's some things that you want to change. So, how do we get this internal motivator going? How do we get our cat purr motivator kind of continuing on autopilot? Like, how do we feel these motivations like to do these things regularly? This is especially important for like habit change for things like maybe eating or exercising or things like that. So, we have to have a strong emotional pull towards that change. And that can either be a really positive thing or a really negative thing. So, when thinking about things that are like kind of creating some emotion and some feelings behind the change that we want to have, versus like, I know I shouldn't eat fast food, or I know that I probably shouldn't go on an online date with this dude that just asked me out a half hour ago because I need to set boundaries. So we've got to really think about like the longer term. And that's hard for humans. It's not really how our brain's wired. We're wired to respond to our immediate environment, but really taking a big zoom out and thinking, okay, so in the long term, if I choose healthy food and I move my body, I am going to feel so confident. I am going to be able to be unlimited physically. If I want to hike a mountain, I can hike a mountain. I know that I'm going to live longer. So, really kind of figuring out what core emotion you have behind the thing that you want can really help kind of keep you sustained and motivated. I have a friend, Taylor Thompson. She just released an amazing book. We'll put the link below. But she talks a lot about associating like one word or feeling with a goal or a category that you have in your life. And that can really help keep it short and simple. So when you're getting the urge to grab an extra cookie or go through the drive-through line or swipe yes on a dude that you know isn't right for you, you can revert back to like that one thought or emotion or feeling. So when you're thinking about the big things that you want in life, your goals, your dreams, really kind of getting some fiery energy behind them can help you stick to them better. I have a little side tangent here. I became so sick in my body because I wasn't listening to it, because I was seeking immediate pleasure and gratification from food, from alcohol. I developed a chronic rash that at the time I didn't know was caused by food and sugar and things like that. But it was that short term game that was keeping me stuck in this long term being sick. So that's one of the things that I talk a lot about is like our bodies are really trying to tell us and talk to us and tell us what we need. And for you, maybe you got a banging body. That's great. But maybe you get chronic headaches or maybe you get anxiety attacks when you're around certain people. And like our bodies are so incredible. A lot of times they're telling us what they need, but we are putting off healing them for short term gain. So I want you to start implementing changes that are going to help you become the you want to be before you get sick. I could spend all day talking about change. And you've probably heard some of this stuff before because self help and personal development things cycle around. Really, it's just about the delivery. It's about if you're ready to hear this right now in your life, if something clicks or switches. So just bear with me. I'm not going to go into every single thing I've done to grow and change my life, but I will kind of wrap up here with one of the things that I kept trying on and it kept not fitting. So I tried to do absolutes. I tried to do like big all or nothings. Like I'm never going to eat sugar again and I'm not going to ever eat fast food again. Like okay, like our brain does not like absolutes. And so if you could say like I'm not going to do that for right now, or and this worked well for me when I was letting go of alcohol. It was like, okay, I'm going to make it a week, a month, 3 weeks, 3 months. And down the road, our brain likes those shorter term, kind of immediate gratification sort of goals and things to strive towards. So, that being said, I think especially with like lifestyle changes and movement and food and things like that, we have a tendency to be like, I'm going to do this diet and I'm going to stick to it. Absolutely. Well, that's kind of hard for us. So think about maybe breaking it down into some smaller categories. That did work for me. I was just like, chips were my bugaboo. So I was just like, I'm not going to eat chips. Okay. I didn't say I'm not going to ever have any snacks or any carbs. I said, I'm just not going to eat chips. When I was kind of going through some of my skin rash stuff, I was like, I'm going to cut way back on sugar and I'm going to cut out dairy. Those were things that worked for me that made me feel good. So if you have like a food group that you know doesn't make you feel great, you could even try like, okay, I'm not going to keep it in my house, but I'll experiment with it when I go out to a restaurant. And really kind of creating that space in between how you do things or why you do things can be really helpful. Here's one thing I know to be true. When you pick a few things to work on, you start building your trust muscle. It allows you to create bigger, broader changes in your life. Your brain starts to say, oh, like we're safe making changes. We're safe doing things a little bit differently. Like this gal's got it. So I would encourage you just to like avoid making like giant, huge things and really know that when you work on one area of your life, it affects the other areas of your life. So maybe for you, that's like, I'm going to show up differently for work this year, or I'm going to show up differently for my interpersonal relationships, or I'm going to change my relationship with food a little bit. You don't have to do everything at one time. When you kind of pick a category, you pick a couple of things to work on, it does flow through all the categories of your life. So just know that even if it only feels like you're just making tiny little itty bitty changes, everything you're doing is affecting everything you're doing. And give yourself grace and celebrate those things. So, one of the things that can really help create change is finding some people, whether that's on the internet or your community, or read some biographies, some people who have done the things that you want to do, and that will help you believe that it is possible for you. I'm going to get a little bit philosophical. I'm going to get a little bit woo on you. So, if we think about nature, it is constantly in motion. It is constantly changing. You are nature. Everything in you is constantly changing. Your cells are dying right now. Your blood is in a different spot in your body. You're aging. You are healing, perhaps, or maybe you're hurting yourself a little bit by your choices that you're making, but you are always inherently changing. That is how nature works. That is how the universe works. So, change is possible for you. Figure out your underlying reasons of why you want to change, identify if they're your true core beliefs, kind of take things small, baby steps at a time. Give yourself grace and find a way to believe that the things that you want are possible for you.